Today, we get to welcome Josh Downs to the podcast. Josh is a motivational speaker. He's a podcaster. He's a performance coach and a mentor, and he's a father of two beautiful daughters. Over the course of his life, he has learned that one of the greatest adventures of life is self-discovery and personal growth and development. He has two podcasts, The Daily Drive and The Daily Drive for Teens. And these two podcasts are short daily faith-based thoughts and stories and principles combined with personal development, the practices that help us to be able to connect with ourselves and connect with God a lot better. So we want to welcome Josh to the podcast today, and we're just blessed to be able to have someone like you be able to share your thoughts and inspiration with us.
Well, it's absolutely my privilege and pleasure to be here. I've learned a little bit about what you guys are doing, and like I mentioned earlier, just so impressed with everything that you're putting together. So happy to be a part of it in any way that I can. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we met Josh actually just this last week. We were introduced to him by one of our speakers at our conference, Jeff, and he's going to be one of our motivational speakers. But apparently these guys taught together years back. That's how they know each other. And Jeff just reached out to us and said, hey, you might want to see if you can get this guy either involved in the conference or something. He's doing some really cool work and doing some good work. Now, this is a little bit different because it's not really all about health, but in the end, it is about health because it's about getting our mental health so that we can actually have, if we have physical health, we can get our mental health a little bit better. So tell us a little bit about the podcast and how you kind of started doing those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's just funny, you know, the different turns the twists and turns that life takes sometimes. And so for really the majority of my career, I was teaching seminary, and then went through some life changes that required me to kind of move into something else that was different. And I found myself in medical device sales, and had been doing that for about 5 years. But there's just, you know, how when you feel like you just have a calling, or you just feel like there's something for you to do. I'm sure you guys know.
You have a desire to teach within you, right? You have that desire to teach. And
well, and I attribute some of that to my dad. He was a seminary institute teacher for 40 years, so a long time. And so that's always just been a part of my DNA. And I loved what I was doing with the company I was with called Stryker. But the back of my mind, there was just always something missing. And so I started, you know, doing some personal discovery and trying to learn about how I can kind of teach outside of seminary. And I did some life coaching and some certification through that, and started doing some mentoring. And then one day my sister just approaches me and just says, hey, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I just thought this is something that you could do. And so I didn't really know a whole lot about podcasts at the time, but I decided to look into it, and I felt like, you know, yeah, this would be something I could do. So I started that whole process of learning, you know, everything I could about it, and the different equipment needed, and the editing and programs, all that kind of stuff. And just kind of really lit a fire under me to that I found I had a passion for. And that was yeah, doing podcasts and getting messages out there in that way. So it was about a year ago I started the Daily Drive, and I wanted to create something that was, you know, based on my teaching experience, could really impact people. And I recognized the best way to do that is consistency and probably short, you know, keep things kind of short. So that was the premise of the podcast, was just short, daily, inspirational, faith-based, self-help thoughts, you know, that wouldn't take a lot of time. People could listen to in the morning as they're getting ready, going to school, taking their kids to school. And it just kind of started from there, and been doing it ever since. And just recently started one just for teens. I wanted to kind of focus a little bit more on that aspect, with obviously all the time that I spent in the classroom and being able to connect with them. So it's kind of how it all started. And then it's just kind of been going from there.
you know, Josh, Shane said that we just met you last week, but I have actually been listening to your podcast for a while. And I love the fact that it is just that short, you know, 10 minutes around that time that you can just get that little inspiration for your day. And I've actually been able to learn a lot from you. And so thank you for sharing your talents with me too, because I feel like I've been blessed because of just those little inspirational moments that you've been able to give.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. As you know, podcasting is also kind of a lonely journey. It's just, you and the microphone. And sometimes you wonder, are people even getting?
Is there somebody even listening?
Is anybody listening to me? Was anybody here? And when you get little kind of, messages like that, or just, and I'm sure, as you have, just people reaching out saying, hey, thanks for doing this. That's the payday right there. And that's what kind of, fuels you to keep going. So I appreciate you listening and sharing with me that, your thoughts on it.
And it's fun that you're going to be doing it for teens now. So what have you learned from the story that you've gone through, your experiences that you've gone through?
That is that life is not going to go the way that we always think. That's probably number one, right? I don't think any of us will get to the end of our lives and say, oh yeah, that's pretty much how I thought it would go. We're going to get to the end of our life. Just it's amazing the twists and turns that come to us. And I think I've learned from my story and experience is to try to let go of that control, right? I know that we all have a blueprint in our minds of how our life is meant to go, but we have to also learn to be able to adapt to the changes that life brings to us, right? That our plan may not always coincide with God's plan, and to trust that His plan is always better than our plan, even if we don't see it and it doesn't make sense. And really just learning to surrender. I mean, that's I think the journey that I've gone, especially these past 5 years. So many changes that I didn't want to go through, didn't want to experience, didn't want to have in my life, that left me, really questioning a lot of what I thought life was all about, my faith, all those kind of things. But I've just learned through the course of that, the significance and the importance of surrendering and just trusting, that in the end, even if you can't see it now, everything will one day work out, and it'll be for the best, as hard as that is sometimes.
Well, and just because it's God's plan doesn't mean there's not going to be pain along the way, right? Because that's, I mean, in my profession, people come to see me a lot because of pain, and people, you can tell when they're hunched over, they're leaned over, they're trying to avoid pain. And in our mentality of things, we always try to avoid pain because no one likes that. And I'm not talking just physical pain, but the pain and suffering emotionally and things of that nature. So we try to avoid that. So that's why it's sometimes it's easier to just take that easier path than what we really should be doing, for sure.
Yeah.
So what oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I couldn't agree more. I've seen that too.
So what's unique about your podcast? What kind of makes it unique? Is it pretty much all faith-based, or is it do you kind of just depends on the day whether you go with more self-motivation, self-help kind of stuff, gospel thrown in, what kind of stuff?
Yeah, I guess as I put it together, obviously I had 10 years of experience in teaching seminary, and so I had the faith-based part, nailed down, and obviously raised in the church the way that I was. That was just always been a part of me. But what I didn't really have a good understanding of was just all of the mental processes that are in play in our life, the self, conscious, the subconscious processes, all of the, different kind of self-help things that are out there that are so important. Really, I've learned to understand. I had no idea, really what boundaries were. Honestly, I didn't know anything about codependency. I didn't know anything about trauma. I didn't know about, emotions and how they really are chemical based, and how we can become addicted to good and bad, emotions and feelings, and the power that the story that we tell ourselves can have in creating our life. I just didn't understand all of these kinds of things that are really so much, I think, being brought into the light so effectively by so many, deep thought thinkers that are really out there, from, people like Tony Robbins, Brene Brown. I mean, just great, thinkers about the self-help and self-awareness and mindfulness and development, all that kind of stuff. And so as I went on my own personal journey and learned about all that, of course, my thinking is, man, why didn't I know about these things? It would have affected so much of my life in a positive way and helped me to understand things in my marriage and all of that kind of stuff and relationships with people. And so a part of me wanted to share that and get that out there as much as I could. But as I went through and went through that kind of journey of self-discovery, I also recognized that as much as these concepts are, and as cutting edge maybe as sometimes we make them to be, they really aren't that that new, because I started to make connections in the scriptures and in stories that these things have always been there.
Right.
I remember listening to Brene Brown's wonderful dissertation on shame and guilt. And, it was really one of those TED Talks that really set her on her path the way that did. And it was wonderful. And she talked about vulnerability and all the keys to overcoming shame, the difference. And it was so great from the way that she worded it. But as I was listening, I just thought, I've heard this before. And it was in the Garden of Eden, the very first thing, Adam and Eve, they make a mistake. What does Satan tell them to do? Hide, right? Because of shame. Right. What does God do? He wants them to come out, and he doesn't force them. He allows them to choose to be vulnerable, right? I mean, it's the same concepts, just it's in there, woven in the gospel, in the scriptures, in things that God's given us since the beginning of time. So for me, the podcast, I wanted to create something that kind of blended the two. I noticed that in a lot of the self-help and personal development that was out there wasn't a lot of connecting back to the source of development and how to really grow. They're the very being that created us, right? And I think the person can study all they want about personal growth and development, but if they can't and don't connect with the one that created them, that knows them best, that has the power to enable them to develop far beyond their own capacity, then we're missing the boat completely. So the podcast for me was kind of meant to find the balance between the two. I love talking about self-help and personal development, but then I love tying it back to faith and just showing, like, look, this is where it's been taught. This is where we can, see it in the scriptures. This is where God has already given us these lessons and examples. So let's partner with him to develop and grow as individuals.
I really like that, because unfortunately, a lot of times when people go down the self-help route, they forget God. They lose their faith. And that's the sad thing that I've seen with a lot of it, is that they go into this, it's just mindfulness, and there's, something out there, but it's your truth and your this, and it's instead of because there's reality, and then there's, what God has done is what God's done, right? And there's nothing that can change that, but whether we allow that to be part of our lives is a little bit different. So no, I appreciate it. You're kind of mixing the two, because I have seen, and we've seen a lot of that, and I see a lot of that in the natural world. A lot of times, for some reason, people go into that natural world and they kind of, all of a sudden, God gets taken out of their lives, and it's pretty sad.
And one thing I have noticed is that when we do go through these hard health issues that we experience, that it's actually finding that source that gives you the strength to continue on and to continue to see, like, how can I get through these health challenges that I have? I know, like with me, when I had my health challenges, it was like pulling back, seeing, what can I learn from this? And how can this make me become a better person, rather than becoming the victim of all of our health challenges? What are the things that we can learn from that? And so that is why I love bringing in, like, what you teach, that self help, self-motivation, things like that, because we need to be able to have those extra sources out there. And I feel, that it's God. I feel that he has a bigger plan for us. And searching for that is going to fill in those pieces that we're going to have through our health journeys that can be really difficult for some people.
Yeah, really, really can be, and I think that's a big part of it. Like all that, the personal health, growth and development, and the mindfulness, they're great tools to have. And I mean, and understanding boundaries and codependency really helped me to make sense of some of the challenges that I had in my marriage, and why it didn't last, why it didn't work, and and help me to make sense of a lot of those challenges, right? But at the same time, I'm also of the opinion that we will go through things that no Tony Robbins or Brene Brown talk will be able to solve and bring enough, power and comfort to our lives to get through them, especially when it comes to health challenges. And so, trying to really connect and partner with God in the process, allowing him to kind of teach us and help us to see, maybe not always right away, some of the reasons for these challenges, but help us to get through them long enough until the answers come, right? And that's part of just the journey of faith, right? It's just trusting that there are reasons, there's things that we're meant to learn, maybe that others are meant to learn, and just putting our faith and trust that he knows what he's doing. It's one of the hardest things that we'll ever go through is really learning. I used to teach my students all the time about Abraham and Isaac, and I always thought that was kind of an extreme example, right? For us to, kind of compare ourselves to, like, well, if he could do it, I could do all my little, things down here. That's okay. We'll never be asked to do, what he's done. But then I go through divorce, and for at least half the time, I basically have to put my children that I love more than anything in this world on God's altar. I had to just turn them over to him, and I couldn't be there. I couldn't protect them. I just had to let them go. And that was one of the first times I realized, like, no, we're going to be asked to put just as much on God's altar as Abraham did. And it's going to take the same amount of kind of faith and trust. And thank goodness he kind of does that, and he eases us into it a little bit. But it's definitely one of the hardest things I think we'll learn to do and experience. Again, it's just kind of surrendering our will to his and trusting that he knows what he's doing.
When we go through some of these health challenges, it's like what you said. Sometimes we just have to turn it over to God. Sometimes we just have to put these health challenges on the altar and be like, what is it? What is it that you want us to do? Because a lot of these health challenges we have are out of our control. There's definitely ways that we can help ourselves, but some of them, they're out of our control, and there's nothing. When we continue to fight that, it just makes it mentally a lot harder for us.
When we kind of go through the same pattern, right? I'm sure a lot of times there's that blame God, like, how are you letting this happen to me, right? I mean, we all do that, right? How can I was doing this, I was trying to be good, how are you letting this happen to me? Same thing with health. How can that, why me? Why is this happening to me? And then it kind of goes through all the different phases, and then it ends up just cure me, and then I'll do what you want me to do, right? Kind of thing. In a lot of instances, some people, they go the complete opposite, but that's kind of what happens. And it's kind of same thing with what you're saying. It's, if you put that trust back there, it is what it is. I mean, sometimes life isn't easy, and if we ever thought life was easy, we're in the wrong game.
Yeah, I don't know that we talk enough just about, how hard it is, and how hard it's supposed to be, right? We talk about, this is a time for testing, for refinement, for growth. And that only comes through intense experiences, right? I was watching Kung Fu Panda 3, I think, the other day with my daughters, and there's a great line that was delivered in that. Yeah, it's funny where you can find principles of truth, but the idea was, Po the panda was told by his mentor that if you only do the things that you can do, you'll never be anything more than you are right now.
Right.
And I love that.
Wow,
I love that statement.
Yeah,
right?
perfect. Right.
We all want to just do what we can. I mean, that's where comfort lives, but comfort is the enemy of progress, always has been. And so sometimes, we get pushed out of our comfort zone, some pretty painful ways, don't we?
So what is the difference between the daily drive and the teen one that you're doing? Is it the teen daily drive also? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it is. The daily drive ended up being probably on average about 10 to 15 minutes. And there's some, I mean, I get messages all the time from parents just who love listening to it with their kids. But I also got a lot of messages like, hey, is there any way you can condense and shorten any of these to fit the attention span of a teenager, And and I started to find with my own girls, they love listening to them too. But
so how old are your kids? How old are your kids? Just for
yeah, so I have two. Brooklyn's 15, Michaela's 13.
Okay.
And I refer to them as little, but they are growing up way too fast. I just started teaching Brooklyn how to drive this year.
You're
Shane,
getting into that really fun
kind of freaking out
hormonal
about
stage.
that. Yeah. Yeah, I got some real interesting experiences that are coming.
That's because
really
we have a
fast.
13-year-old daughter too. That's why.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we have 6 kids, 5 boys, 1 girl. Yeah.
Oh, that poor girl.
That poor girl, because she's got me as a dad that doesn't understand all this stuff. It's like, just step up, why can't I just have the same conversation I do with my boys?
Yeah, that's oh, I have an uncle in Idaho that is the absolute man's man. Just like, we just worship the ground he walks on, because he's just like the guy. But he had 8 girls, and so there was clearly something he needed to learn from, that and it's been fun to watch him just kind of soften over the years with all these girls that have come through. So God knows what he's doing, even with our kids, right?
So you put together, so you were doing the daily drive, and then you started doing the one for teens, and that's just more based towards kind of what teens are dealing with, kind of stuff.
It is, yeah. I thought, well, I'm going to make one that's, obviously more geared towards teens. I'm starting to do a lot more youth group kind of speaking. I'm starting to do some assemblies in schools and things like that. So I wanted to have something that was available just for them, but then also just could fit in that kind of sweet spot of time, 5 to 6, 7 minutes.
Right, on their drive to school, something like that.
Perfect. Yeah, it's been right. I've been doing, listening to them with my girls since starting that just last week. And it, like I was saying, a lot of times we get to the middle or even the best part at the end, and we just didn't finish before we get to school. And I'm like, we'll try to pick it back up, and then it wouldn't work. So this has been good, because it's just been long enough for a quick drive to school or while they're getting ready. They can.
And is that done every day as well?
Yeah, every day during the week.
Well, I am going to put that on my playlist, because I drive my kids to school every morning, and it will just be something that will be fun to listen to. I didn't know you were doing the teen one till today, so that'll be great.
I haven't really announced it yet, so there it is. It's
okay. Well, we got it here.
Yep.
And are your podcasts on basically all platforms, or?
They are, yeah, pretty much anywhere you can find. Yeah, just if you look for the daily drive, they should both come up.
So you were saying that you speak at different places, like you do some stuff at different schools and things like. What are the kind of the topics you like to speak on with that?
Well, anything, just it's kind of been asking the kids a lot what they want to hear. I love speaking about self-worth, right, and just overcoming some of the tendencies we have to compare ourselves with others. The dangers of social media and how that can affect a person's self-esteem and all the terrible things that kind of come from that. The most recent school I'm going to be speaking at is at Bingham High School, and the topic they came up with was very insightful to me. The theme is "You will be found," and they said, we hear a lot about obviously social media, suicide's been real heavy, all that kind of stuff, but they said there's a lot of us, I think, that just feel like we're not really a part of anything, that we're not seen, that we're not connected. I thought that was so interesting in a world where everybody is, you would think, so connected, that they could feel so disconnected. But I guess the more you think about it, the more it really makes sense. These connections are so surface that we're really, a lot of us, I think, are missing those deeper connections. So I love that, the idea, and I'll probably run with that one for a while, just the idea of you will be found, and what that's like to look for those that are, in need that connection, and how for us that maybe feel alone to kind of start breaking out of that, and start trying to do things that help us to feel more connected.
Well, I've always told our boys, because they're the ones in high school and stuff, and they've been active, involved, in sports and different things. So they're kind of known. It's like, what? It doesn't hurt to smile and say hi when you walk down the hall, because you never know what that one hi is going to say to somebody that maybe is having a bad day. You don't know them very well, but instead of just walking past, put your head down, just smile and say hello. Make somebody feel good. It's okay to be nice. you
Well,
know.
and
So frustrating.
it's an extreme example, but like you said, you never know. I did a little thing with the Bingham High Minorettes the other day, and one of them came up and just we were talking after, and we were talking about that very thing. And she said, "Yeah, I've learned you never know what a difference can make when you even just saying hi." And she told an experience she had just with a kind of a former neighbor that she really wasn't friends with or that close to, but just saw him walking down the hall and decided to just smile and say hi.
Right.
And she said later on, I got a text that he just said he was really having a really, really hard day. Just and did go into, I don't want to go into a lot of details about it, but it was just, he was really struggling and really trying to decide if he wanted to even just keep living. And yet he said, you telling me hi and taking the time to acknowledge me, just,
Exactly.
he said, just, it got me through it. Yeah. It just got me through it.
Yeah. So how does I mean, we've talked a lot about the the mental aspect of this and different things like that. One of the things that we obviously are doing is the Be Healthy Utah Natural Health and Wellness Conference. And to kind of relate this back, what have you learned in terms of what do people need to do in regards to their health in order to get their mind right?
Well, I've learned that that's where it all starts, and that's one of the reasons I'm so glad we were able to connect. In working with people individually, the very first thing I'll ever do is try to figure out where their health is physically, because before I can do anything with them mentally, they have to have a good foundation in place physically. I've just found that to be the case, that our physical health is really the foundation for everything else. It's really hard to feel the spirit if you're not, feeling good physically. It's really hard to feel the emotions that you need to feel, and if you're not feeling good physically.
Well, the thing people don't
The
realize is your gut health is what controls your emotions. And no one
Yeah.
has that connection. No one realizes that. It's like if your gut health is jacked, you're not going to get the proper neurotransmitter function. And they just don't realize it, right?
Well, you don't have to go that far to make that connection. You just think of the last time you junked out on pizza and licorice or pop or whatever. I mean, yeah, you're not having the best thoughts. You're not feeling the best. You're not motivated. I mean, it's everything.
Right.
So every person that comes through my door, that says that they're struggling with life, they're struggling with whatever challenge or problem that they're having.
And they're going to McDonald's and getting a Diet Coke.
10 times out of 10, that's what's going on. Well, before we even address, your issues of not feeling like you have purpose, let's talk a little bit about, your health. And yeah, the sleep isn't there. The food intake's terrible. They're not getting enough water. They're not, exercising consistently. The pillars of good health, are just not there. And so for me, I've just learned that is absolutely vital to do to help people, is and what I found too, it's very interesting, is that we tend to treat what we place value in. If we place value in something, we treat it well. And so when somebody's not treating themselves well, it's because they don't value.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart to even say they don't value themselves.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, the best way I can help someone start to love themselves is to start valuing themselves and do so by taking care of themselves, right? And trying to help them to make that connection that they are incredibly special and wonderful just the way that they are. And as they start to kind of buy into that and kind of see themselves through, God's eyes, really, it really helps to motivate them to make those changes physically, to recognize that I do have worth, and the way I'm taking care of myself is reflective of that. And so it's really rewarding to watch somebody start to get these healthy practices in place, and to see their confidence and their just view of themselves and their personal worth start to skyrocket. It's one of the most rewarding things to see. So I love what you guys are doing, because that's in essence what you're doing. You're helping people connect with who they are, and in a natural way. And I got plenty of thoughts on that for sure. But and it's really helping them to love who they are and to value, who they are in this body that God's given them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Josh, for joining us today. We feel really blessed that we were able to connect, because it does start with our minds, and our health and our minds, like that goes in combination together. And when we work on one, we're actually working on the other.
Yeah.
And it's a
No,
great foundation.
it is. It's so true. And like I said, with you guys and the focus that you're doing on natural healing and health. I was traveling on the roads of Preston, Idaho a little while back, and my uncle Ed that I referred to earlier, he's a farmer, and he was telling me about how they do crops and grow crops. And he said that every year they change the crop. And I asked him why that was. And he said, well, if we just plant the same crop on the same plot of land and soil over and over, it just depletes it, right? It absolutely depletes it. So he rotates, these crops. Some crops bring, put the nutrients back into the soil, and others obviously take it out. And so being able to manage that. And I just thought, that's a great life lesson. He said that's so much better to do that organically than it is to throw the pesticides and the fertilizer on them. And I just, again, I'm always looking for patterns, because I believe that we live in a living and breathing world, and God is trying to teach us in everything that he's done and the way that it functions and works. And but how many of us kind of try to get the quick fixes of, with energy, and these 5-hour energies, these energy drinks, the coffee, all these things, these synthetic, right, means of trying to feel good and feel healthy, and they're fertilizer that we're just throwing on there. They're temporary solutions that aren't real. So I love this grassroots movement that you're doing to kind of help bring it back to natural and organic, and I think that long term, that is always going to be the best resource for developing energy and true health and strength and longevity through the course of life. So thank you for what you're doing, bringing awareness to a very important, topic.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast with us today. So just give us the actual true names of the podcast, so if they look it up, they know exactly what to look for.
Sure. Yeah. It's the Daily Drive podcast with Josh Downs, and the Daily Drive podcast for teens.
Okay. So the word is in there for both of them.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. This has been a great conversation. We appreciate you being on, and we hope that, people get some good value out of what our conversation has been. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Josh.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for the time. You bet. Thanks, you guys.